Hi, are you ready to learn about awesome platformers, incredible spacefaring adventures, or even a groundbreaking and more immersive than anything else you've played RPGs? Well, I'm glad that you are, so let's jump straight in. Being a pirate is not easy at all. I mean, not only you have to ruthlessly attack other ships, raid and pillage settlements, battle sea beasts big and small, and seek treasures, but also have one of the hardest working livers in the Caribbean, or Indian Ocean, as traps and treasures is actually set there. And trust me when I say this, grog that pirates drink, or rum, however you wanna call it, is not what you can get in your local store. It's an Amiga exclusive, so if you've never had a chance to experience how gaming on the system looked like, I believe that it's an excellent title to start with, as it represents the best that the system could offer, in terms of sounds, graphics, and level design. It may not pioneer in either of the three, but all of them put together make for a very enjoyable and very Amiga-feeling classic. I mean, just see for yourself. Traps and Treasures places you in the stylish brown leather with gold straps shoes of a fearless, grog-drinking, swashbuckling and fruit-loving pirate, Jeremy Flynn. Why does he like fruit so much and gobble on them whenever he gets a chance, you may wonder? Well, who knows, personally I'd bet on scurvy, but it's just a guess. I'm not a pirate now, and even when I was one back in the day, I was not that kind of a pirate. Let's say that the seas that I traveled on were electronic and not stinking of fish. Anyway, Flynn is in a pickle, or in a gherkin. Potato, potato, pirato, pirato. Point is, he has a problem on his hands, and it's not a small one. His entire crew of 9 braves has been kidnapped by a nefarious and fearsome pirate Redbeard and his band of cutthroats. You know, I was always under the impression that pirates killed each other and not kidnapped. I mean, keeping someone alive requires food, water, and a place for them, do one and two, because you don't want them to relieve themselves on the floor. So the whole situation is a bit puzzling to me. I mean, I understand kidnapping of a young and beautiful governor's daughter or a royal family member for ransom, and even other pirate leaders for the rewards put on their heads. But regular stinky and sweaty pirates? Now that's unheard of. Playing as Flynn, you have to rescue your entire crew and all the treasures that the Redbeard stole. And you have to do it alone, smartly, and in style no less. Because not only the 9 sailors is all you had, but also your ship crashed on a nearby rocks during a terrible storm, so the crew and the new ship is what you're after. The game is split into 4 thematically unique levels of Threadneedle Lagoon, Skull Grotto, the Temple and the Fortress. The last naturally being where the Redbeard resides. The first, while still rather demanding, I'd consider a tutorial level only, as it's easier than the others and considerably shorter too. Levels 2 to 4 will not only take a long while to beat, because of all the times that you'll fail like a boob, but also because they're huge, scrolling in all 4 directions and will require a fair amount of backtracking, solving simple puzzles, fighting Redbeard's goons and avoiding of numerous traps. They may all be linear in their design once you learn how to beat them, that is, but it will not be something you'll do over one weekend. Trust me. I mean, for instance, even something as simple as opening of the door to progress may require getting the key for them, which in turn may be hidden somewhere, for instance behind a destructible wall on the other side of the level, which naturally needs explosives to be destroyed. These have to be purchased in a shop, and that requires money that first has to be found in treasure chests or other random locations. I think that you see where I'm going with it, right? Traps and Treasures may seem like a simple save captives and collect gold kind of a platformer, but in reality it's anything but. The puzzles may not be too demanding and all similar to what I just described, being of the environmental kind mostly, but they're all fun to work out. The enemies and traps though, well, these are aplenty and will put your platforming skills to the test. I mean, they all may be marine themed, beautifully animated and to a certain degree even cute looking, but they're deadly nonetheless, and you'll have to bring in your A-game and ninja-like reflexes to do well. Traps and Treasures' presentation is great. The game is chock full of super smoothly animated sprites, be it Flynn, traps, underwater fauna and flora, or even enemy pirates, and a literal sea of colors, crafted to the last pixel and moving as if they were taken straight from the cartoon. What's worth noting here as well is the smartly used music scripting that switches tracks in very specific situations, usually in response to what's happening on the screen. So there is this main tune that plays on the loop, but when you for instance dive underwater, it will switch to a more suiting, nautical melody. It's perhaps nothing new in video gaming overall, but the effect is nice and complements the presentation. The swashbuckling piratey atmosphere is spilling through the screen when playing Traps and Treasures, and for the life of me, I cannot fathom a smart guess why the game didn't get more wider recognition and popularity. Maybe because it wasn't as well known outside of its country of origin, or maybe the advertising was limited, or perhaps the reason was Amiga being on its last legs in 1993, barely a year from when Commodore went bankrupt. We will never know. And while we could discuss here if releasing it on PC would change anything, it's ultimately pointless. In the end, I suppose, the success and popularity was just not in the cards for it. despite it being one of the best and most fun platformers on the Amiga, and a game I enjoy coming back to, even if only to fail a couple of levels in. While Blue Dragon is a great JRPG, and one that looks incredible thanks to late Mr. Akira Toriyama's graphics, it's not the game I boasted about in the intro. That one is actually the last title in this video, but for now let's focus on what's at hand. Unlike most JRPGs of the time, Blue Dragon was actually an Xbox 360 exclusive. I wouldn't go as far as calling it a system seller, that would probably be Gears of War, but it's probably one of the best and most fun games in the genre to ever land on the system, and one I'm sure many of you never played. It's a wonderful and magical experience that, while perhaps a bit on the easier side, it's still so enchanting and warm that you'll hardly feel the 50 hours it takes to complete it pass by. In many ways, I think that Blue Dragon is better than the Final Fantasy games of its time. I wouldn't say that it's better than the best that the Final Fantasy had to offer over its decades of games, but Blue Dragon is a single title, and it's already more fun and engaging than quite a few of Square Enix's classics. Blue Dragon starts off slow, with its story taking place in a small village named Tolta. The village has been raided for some time by the evil creature known only as the Land Shark, always preceded by the menacing and mysterious purple clouds, or stink clouds as I'd like to call them. Whenever the creature attacks Tolta village or any others too, it leaves behind a trail of destruction and despair. And as evil creatures go, I'll take a Land Shark any day of the week over the likes of a mythical fantasy monster known only as the Trouser Snake. Well, more like a tragedy of the call the police kind of a monster, and not a fantasy one per se, but if you're to choose an attacker and someone to raid your town, definitely pick the shark. The Trouser Snake is no fun to most who have been on the receiving end of it unexpectedly. Anyway, three young heroes, Shu, Clacker and Jiro, decide to try to capture the monster, saving the village in the process. Once again, so that we're on the clear on the subject, capturing the Land Shark is all fine, but do not go hunting for the Trouser Snakes, you may not like what you'll find. So, as they go about that, they soon realize that not only the Land Shark is not really a creature and a rather complicated machine, a construct if you will, but also that there's an evil person behind the attacks, one only known as Nene, which coincidentally sounds like what the units in Age of Empires used to say when converting enemies to their side. Do you remember? Aye, na-na-na, aye, na-na-na. Yeah, the ones. Never mind, I'm clearly straying onto other, less important subjects here. So, armed with the knowledge who's behind it all and nearly no other useful facts whatsoever, our heroes leave the village seeking the villain in order to stop him and his ancient but incredibly powerful technology from evil doings at all cost. Completing Blue Dragon and all of its side missions will easily take you around 50 to 60 hours, and while it's objectively speaking a lot, especially for the game from 2006, it won't feel like it, and like I initially mentioned, it will pass like a breeze. All because you'll be having so much fun. With its masterfully crafted storytelling, its fun and surprisingly deep characters, and the uncanny beauty of the world that the adventure takes place in. You'll get lost in the plot and where it will take you, and in the tactical combat battles that you'll partake in. Oh, and since we somehow landed on combat, let me tell you a word or two about it. It's naturally turn-based and party-centric and features shadow monsters. Well, I mean, each of your heroes will have a particular monster at their disposal, and these are sorta manifestations of our heroes' inner powers. They have a variety of attacks, skills and spells, and you'll use those monsters to do your bidding. They naturally also gain experience and level up, unlocking new skills and abilities and becoming stronger and stronger. And funny enough, unlike most other JRPGs of the time, you're not chasing the difficulty curve with grinding, trying to get better and better to be able to progress with the story, and for most of the time are at exactly right point to face what's ahead of you. The battles are also not randomized, and you don't have to fear encounters popping out of nowhere when you're not ready for them, as all the enemies are visible in the game world, and if you don't decide to quote-unquote walk into them, the combat will not take place. Blue Dragon's presentation was incredible for its time, full 3D, with characters designed by and in style of the iconic manga creator Akira Toriyama, and in beautiful, often otherworldly feeling locations. The sound design and music scores are also fantastic and fit perfectly to the overall atmosphere of the game. It's a title that will give you the warm and pleasant feeling inside as much as it will keep you on the edge, awaiting the next twist and turn in the story. It's immersive, it's captivating, it's beautiful, in short, it's a must-play. Heartlight is a game that I think most people never heard of. It originally released in 1990 on an 8-bit Atari, and I don't mean the Atari consoles here, but those small home computers, you know, those 400/800 of the XL XE variety, and these were not that widespread, at least when compared to their console counterparts or the C64. Still, despite dropping where it did, the game was good enough to get a port to the Amiga in 1993 and another one to PC in 1994. That last was even published by Epic Mega Games, which at the time at least, it was a synonym of quality in the shareware corner of the video gaming. Well, my first experience with Heartlight was on the Amiga, when I got it from a friend on a bootleg disc, and I played it quite a lot there, I must add. I also made sure to look it up and source it when I moved to PC. Given when and where Heartlight released though, so early 90s and in Poland, when the country was enjoying its newfound freedoms after freeing itself from an iron Soviet grip, Polish programmers hardly ever thought about other countries and were focused on supplying quality software to their fellow Poles. So it's only the PC port that got the very rare and difficult to find these days English version. But whichever port you manage to get your paws on, hold on to it, ignore the language it's in entirely as it's irrelevant, because it's gameplay where the Heartlight shines. But we'll get to that in a minute. Well, it has to be noted here too that the early 90s was the time when the piracy in the country was at its absolute peak, so it was considerably much easier to purchase a cracked version of the game than the original. And cheaper too, but that's kinda obvious. So one would think that aiming at the Western market was theoretically a better choice, at least when it came to money. But quite surprisingly, hardly any of the Polish dev teams did it back then. Whatever. Heartlight doesn't ask you to follow its story, doesn't offer dialogues whatsoever, or any action sequences either. It's basically a clone, nay, a new and original take on Boulder Dash formula and my all-time favorite version of the game. Its levels are not multi-screen scrolling mazes though, and always only fill up the entire screen of 20 by 12 in size grid. They are much more puzzle-focused than Boulder Dash 2, which is a nice change. While each of the versions has a slightly different number of levels overall and is between 64 and 70, it's still plenty enough to satisfy all those minds that crave logic challenges. Especially that some of them are really tricky, and you'll find yourself repeating them more than once to figure out their solutions. Fortunately, as demanding of a game as Heartlight can be, it's also one that realizes the challenge that it offers. So to keep you playing instead of crafting new and imaginary swear words, it forgoes on the two of the well-known Boulder Dash mechanic, namely life counter and timer. Meaning that you have unlimited time to think about each and every stage's solution and can attempt them as many times as you'd like to. Some could say that it makes the game way easier than it has to be, but I'd argue that the word easy should never stand anywhere near the word Heartlight in the same sentence. Well, unless it would be something that would kinda go like that. I've known many easy games and Heartlight is definitely not one. Or even, it's easy to say that Heartlight is difficult and leave it at that, but in reality it can feel like a nightmare. Or maybe something down those lines. I've once had an easy day, but it was not the day when I played Heartlight. I think you get what I'm trying to say here and I can stop now, right? And so that we're clear, I'm not complaining, it's definitely a game to beat and complete, it just requires you to really get that noggin going and all the gears in it turning, as it will try to trap you more than once. And I know that having to repeat a particular stage time after time may feel a bit annoying, tiring or even upsetting, but when you do finally solve it, it's incredibly rewarding. And it's because all of the puzzles are smartly designed, and when things finally begin to click and you get that eureka moment, you instantly see things falling into place and how to carry on through level perfectly. The overall goal of the game is same as in Boulder Dash, so to collect a certain number of items spread around the level. In this particular case, all hearts and then get to the exit. Hearts, same as diamonds in the original, along with other objects found in Heartlight 2, are subject to gravity and you should make sure to avoid having them fall on you, as they will kill you. Other than the hearts, there are also rocks, bombs and balloons in the game, and they all work as you expect them to. So rocks are usually placed in a way that puts your life at risk. For fun, or so that it would be easy to have them fall and block a path to one or more hearts, thus preventing you from completing the level. Bombs, well, bombs explode, they kaboom the 3x3 square, leaving nothing in their blast radius behind. Short of indestructible blocks, that is. Oh, and they blow up both, when falling from heights or when you drop something on them. So keep that in mind. Balloons always move upwards if they can, so while looking innocent and incapable of killing you per se, they can easily hamper your progress by blocking pathways. Other than that, the traditional dirt fills up empty space in most levels and serves as the medium that keeps all the other objects I just mentioned stationary. Heartlight is a genuinely very good and most importantly fun game that deserved much more attention than it ever received. It should be remembered and played and not become just a footnote on a gaming history. But it is what it is and we can't change the past. Either way, I have two positive notes, with which I'd like to end the Heartlight segment here. First of all, and it's the cherry on this already sweet pie of a logic game, is the inclusion of an incredibly easy to use text-based level editor, which literally just has you editing contents of a TXT file to make those, so the initial dozens of levels or so included in the game can easily be extended to hundreds if not thousands if you decide to make them or find some online. And secondly, Heartlight's been re-released as a free browser game, and you can find it under the link that you can see on the screen now. And while perhaps it does not offer a level editor in this version, all of its original levels are included. If you ever get a chance and like puzzle games, don't sleep on Heartlight because too many for too long have already. Innocent Until Caught is a rather polarizing title because as many people seem to love it as there are those who hate it. And equally as many seem not to care about it at all or never even knew it existed. Go figure. It's also a point-and-click adventure taking place in space in the year 2171. Good year for wine. Or so I'm told. 2171 Mars Reserve Rosé is chef's kiss, my dear viewers. Do not miss it next time you wine shopping. Anyway, you play as Jack T. Ladd, a space thief who's been finally ambushed by the Interstellar Tax Office and is ordered to pay his overdue taxes or face the consequences, which in the future, believe it or not, are not fines or imprisonment, but death. Quite drastic, I know. But given where our world seems to be going now, this may be what we'll be facing in our future too. Fortunately, Jack has 28 days to do so or to settle his affairs. Your call really, as you'll be in control. But since you're in no mood to see him die, you're gonna have to find a way for him out of this terrible predicament. So you agree to take 3 high-paying jobs for a rather shady individual, either a pawnbroker Ebenezer or a crime boss going by the name of Git Savage. Like Git Good, but not really. So you're tasked with sourcing of 3 unique items. And by that I naturally mean stealing. Or to be politically correct, you're in charge of facilitation of an ownership change performed by means which would not alert current item owners of their subsequent relocation and legal status modification. When you eventually do perform the deed, that is, because you will succeed, I've no doubt about that. I mean, you're you, so if not you, then who else is capable of such a great feat? It will become painfully obvious that you've been set up, because you're double-crossed and delivered straight to the space police. In prison awaiting your demise, you're given a single chance to escape, which you naturally take without hesitation, bringing a fellow inmate, Narm Napalm, with you. He's a rather stupid fellow, but loyal, and he'll be your stupidly loyal sidekick throughout the rest of your adventure. And from that point onward, Innocent Until Caught will take you on a roller coaster of an adventure throughout the galaxy, dealing with ruthless dictators, weapons capable of destroying entire star systems. I mean, one of them, there's only one really, but it's hella powerful, so it's definitely noteworthy. You'll also be searching for the means to become infinitely rich, and you'll even fall in love. Not necessarily in that order, but there's quite a lot of you'll do while playing. Despite the plot sounding seriously over the top when summarized like that in a couple of burst rapid-fire sentences, it's actually really good and will keep you on the edge of your seat all throughout, sometimes laughing from its cringe jokes, and sometimes wondering what the story may still hold for Jack as it unveils. Innocent Until Caught is composed in a way that most movies are, meaning that it's split into scenes that are connected, but what viewer, or in this particular case gamer, figures out happened between the different locations. So while we, for instance, see Jack taking part in a bar fight and then in the next scene locked up in a prison, we really don't have to see all that took place between, all the procedures and fluff, and can fill in the gaps mentally with the obvious. It may be a bit chaotic approach to storytelling for some of the less imaginative, and especially that it's used throughout the entire game. But most people should have no issues with this kind of a narrative. Still, I thought it was worth mentioning, as despite us experiencing it daily in TV and movies, it is not something that was often used in games back then. The puzzles are a mixed bag, and while a tad on a difficult side, it's sadly not always because of their ingenuity or complex design. Some of them appear to have no real logical solutions and may have you involve yourself in a bit of guesswork, or even worse, trial and error. It's not a great design choice if I'm to be honest, but fortunately it only applies to some of them, and even if they're not instantly solvable, you should have a lot of fun with them when you finally do. Innocent Until Caught is an excellent example of a Christmas tree kind of an adventure game design. So there's this tree, the main plot, the backbone of the game if you will, that's dressed in ornaments, so numerous and often demanding puzzles, interesting and unique storytelling, and then it's finally sparkled with a first-class sound and graphic design. It's a game that's often overlooked, ignored, or downright mistakenly disregarded, when in fact it offers a very satisfying loop and a great time spent pointing and clicking. So, if you're looking for that next adventure to play and don't wanna go for any of the big names, this may be the right choice. It's a little funny, a lot cringe, and even more so interesting to follow. Give it a chance. Now this, last one, is not an old one at all. But it's also a game that I wanted to show you for a long while and didn't know how. Or where, for that matter either. It is fitting to this video in particular though, as it's retro-themed in its style, looking oldish and reminiscent of the classic RPGs of yore. Both, tabletop and computer ones alike. In the same time though, it makes use of many modern mechanics and design choices. But let's not get ahead of ourselves and let me tell you all about it. And hopefully, by the time I'm done, you'll forgive me for including this rather new title here and perhaps even decide to give it a chance. Wildermyth originally released in 2019, so yeah, barely 5-6 years ago, and while everyone who had the chance to sample its original formula loved it, majority of gamers never did. Perhaps because of its rather simple presentation, perhaps because it looked like it was at least a few years older, or perhaps it was limited advertising. The reasons are unimportant, and fortunately it managed to gain big enough traction and following within the hardcore fans who somehow found it, that the ports to all major consoles were commenced, and in 2024 all landed on their respective systems. And hopefully this will help this gem of a game shine on more screens than it ever did when originally appearing on PC only. In essence, Wildermyth is just a party-based, tactical, turn-based fantasy role-playing adventure split into 5 narrative campaigns. But in essence you and I are just humans and the same. But when you take a closer look at us, there is so much more that can be said about either of us, and we're both unique. And same applies to Wildermyth. It's a game truly like no other. It lets you take a group of braves, or farmers, shepherds, blacksmiths or cooks among others. Well, not really, but that's how they initially feel being green at what they do, and on a grand larger-than-life adventure that will either be that long as 5 chapter strong campaign, or a random generated one totally disconnected from the main narrative campaigns, or even the so-called legacy campaigns that allow you to use heroes you've previously did in former playthroughs. But even if all of that sounds interesting already, it still doesn't feel that unique yet, now does it? And you're completely right, it doesn't. But what if I told you that throughout these adventures, all of the companions that you'll be leading will change, they will form rapport with each other, their relationships will become closer, or may even end up with them straight up hating each other, they will become heroes, some may end up as villains too, and not once they may come back from the adventures totally changed, either by some kind of otherworldly magic, or scarring wounds, or psychological trauma, entirely changing their character, how they act in and out of combat, and how it feels to play with them. What's more, the time progresses in the game and on your campaigns too. So while they may start off young, or not, it really depends on how you add to your party, they may end up growing old or even dying of age. And in this, Wildermyth is very similar to much older classic, Darklands, which too allowed characters to live up their entire lives. What's more, the randomized design is not only relegated to the campaign plot but will touch many other aspects of the game. The events will pop up from time to time, choices that you will have to make and that will forever change your characters, or even responses you'll have available in difficult, often life or death situations. Everything can be modified, changed, rebuilt or destroyed by the gods of random. And it feels so fresh you wouldn't believe. I mean, for instance, when your character quote-unquote dies in battle, the game gives you a choice. He may run away from that encounter and be permanently scarred with a penalty that will follow him/her throughout the rest of their life. And yeah, I mean literally in this current campaign, or in the other ones when he or she may not even be a part of your group but a random well-known or not NPC. Or the character may go out, performing a hero-like feat, dealing massive damage to the enemies in the last stand kind of a way, while fading and becoming subject of stories, monuments or songs only. And yeah, again, I'm not exaggerating, this may pop up in the future adventures as heroic braves who've saved the day by sacrificing their lives for the sake of the world, immortalized in tales of yore, monuments, songs and the likes. Or finally, they may buff their party with their last dying breath, making the rest of the battle considerably less leaning in the enemy's favor. If that sounds better and more unpredictable, maybe even natural or realistic feeling, and like something you'd like to play out by yourself, let me assure you, this is only what may happen during deaths. And there are dozens of situations where equally or much more interesting things may happen. Someone may be permanently transformed, turned into a monster, grow an extra limb, lose something, be cursed, or gain new abilities, skills or powers. The possibilities may not be strict endless, but they sure as hell will feel like it. The story is also not just a point A to point B fare, where you're on a linear path never straying off it, it's incredibly dynamic. So every time you make a choice or something happens, it can change a little or a lot, and take you on a completely different path than the one that you were on for numerous hours. And all of that makes Wildermyth infinitely replayable, as no two games are really ever feeling the same. And you know what? I'm not done yet. Wildermyth doesn't shy away from the roguelike genre either, and uses a lot of well-known from them mechanics too. I mean, the characters are all unique and have their strong and weak sides that also change all throughout the game. Whenever enemy loses battle, they get a buff in the form of a special card that either adds numbers to the roster of creatures for future encounters, or buffs the ones that they have already to be stronger, faster or deadlier. Sometimes all of these and more. The modifiers, mutators if you will, that will dramatically change your adventure are everywhere, all the time and in the least expected, often non-combat related encounters. And it's just a fantastic feeling never knowing what to expect, as it's hardly something that could be said about most other games, old or new. But most of all and above else, Wildermyth is a game that's unlike anything that you've played in years, and I can pretty much guarantee that if you risk it, if you give it the few hours just to sample what it's made out of, you will have a very hard time putting it away, as it's not really correct calling it a video game the way that it plays. It's as close to a real tabletop experience as it's possible, and also one that keeps so many details of everything and everyone that passed through the stories you've involved yourself in, that no real game master could ever memorize and equal. It's a modern indie treasure, and one that's more fun than what you've played in the last few months, I promise. You might have noticed that I intentionally did not touch on the subject of the story from the narrative campaigns, so those that are partially pre-baked and have a certain parts of them static, and it's because it's too new of a game for me to spoil it for you. And yes, it's one of those titles that will at some point within the first few hours of gameplay hit you like a truck, and then keep constantly backing and forwarding that truck over your body, treating you like a doll it plays with. It will offer you a lot of super fun turn-based combat, immersive, and I do mean it, storytelling, but most importantly, at some point it may make you feel things. And then it will toy with those feelings, like completely changing the characters that you've grown accustomed to their personalities, to the jokes that they were making, their perhaps dark humor or sarcastic comments, or the innocence that's contrasting with the grim realities that they find themselves in. And the change will not always be for the worse, mind you. In the end, all I wanna say is yes, Wildermyth is not a game, it's an experience, and you should do yourself a favor and let it sweep you away, even if just for a little while. Let's be honest here for a second, guys. Tell me, wasn't it a fantastic selection of games? I mean, I feel that they were all exceptional, and some of them even genre redefining. And yeah, I do mean the Wildermyth here. But whichever of them you decide to play or try out, I'm sure you'll find yourself having a great time. And if you do, make sure to let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, make sure to tap that thumbs up to let YouTube know that you did, so that it would not keep dropping these videos of mine in a pit of invisible and forgotten, kinda like these games we've spoken about today. And also, if you'd like to make sure to stay up to date and never miss my uploads, smash those subscribe and bell icons below to always be notified when they're out. Either way, thanks for watching, be well, eat good food and play games. If possible, all at the same time.